Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So for this week's drawing, I will be drawing another painting of Glorfindel. This is going to be in watercolors, but this is supposed to be as he was going out and searching for Frodo at the beginning of the first book. So to start off with, I began by putting some masking fluid onto where I didn't want paint. Since I was going to paint the background first, that would mean that I put it all on the foreground, so on Glorfindel and even on the banner I had him carrying. And then I brought out a spray bottle so that I could really move the colors around, and then I blocked in the basic colors. So I knew I wanted the background to have more of an ethereal look because I really like that kind of fantasy look. And so I blocked in the basic colors and used a spray bottle to kind of spray them around the page. When working with foliage in particular, you will want to make sure that you use not just greens, I used sap green in particular, but also yellows and blues. The yellows and blues will provide definition and give the appearance of shadows and highlights within the forestry itself. And then just make sure that it's really well wet down and work it wet on wet so they'll kind of blend into the background and give you that kind of light and dark play. I also blocked in some trees using a wet on wet technique and the path that he's riding on. That way it kind of gives everything this nice blended look that I will go in later and add detail to. So now I'm going to move on to the trees, which leads me to a point. So when you are painting or drawing, there's something called atmospheric perspective. So that means that the farther back that something goes, you will typically paint those in blues and purples and very light hues. That is called atmospheric perspective. So the further back they look, they kind of look hazy. That being said, you will still want to remember that the middle ground, so the middle distance will all be still darker colors as if they were receding in a normal way. That will give you this idea of this great big forest that maybe is a little foggy without having to sit there and draw a whole bunch of trees over and over and over again. And so in order to provide this atmospheric perspective in my paintings, I always work wet on wet when I'm working with watercolors. That will really kind of make them phase out as if they're in a fog. Also, in order to make this look even more realistic, I go through and the very close stuff, so I have trees right in the foreground. All those are going to have lots of detail, so they're going to have lots of bark on them so that you can see the difference and that it kind of helps draw the eye deeper and deeper into the painting. Alright, now I'm going to make a quick note about the texture of paper. So as you can tell, I'm having a little bit of difficulty in this painting to actually get some of the details that I want. I knew that this was going to be a problem when I started because I used a paper with a greater tooth. So if you rub your hand over a piece of paper, you'll find how rough it is. So the rougher it is, the more tooth it has. And more tooth, or the amount of tooth that I have on this paper, is great for colored pencils. And I actually meant for this to start off as just kind of a forest scene. I put in the greater detail parts as a last minute design decision. But the main theme was always going to be the forest. Otherwise, I would have used a paper with a finer tooth. So the thing about the tooth and the texture of this paper is the rougher the paper, sometimes the easier it is to keep things under control. The hills and the valleys help prevent the water from spreading all over the place and making a big mess. However, it also means that sometimes you have difficulties to get any amount of detail in. This could even be like lights amount of details because I had some difficulty with the bark even. So in order to bring in a lot of detail and the level of detail that I wanted with this painting, I had to go back through afterwards with colored pencils to kind of tighten everything down, especially around the horse and Glorfindel himself. One of the last things you're going to see me doing in this painting, even though it's not my final steps, since I lost all my footage of the last few steps, the last thing you're going to see me doing is adding texture. So yes, I know I had just told you that I was having difficulty with texture and how to add a lot in with colored pencils, But before then, I was still able to add a decent amount of texture just using my brushes. I just varied the sizes. So I stippled in different colors of browns and purples into the roadway. That way it would have more texture and look kind of gravelly and like there's rocks in it. It looks really cool. And then I moved on to the bushes. I knew where I wanted some of the basic design elements when I did the wash. So I was able to use the basic wash as a foundation for the actual bush, the rest of the bushes themselves, and also to kind of give the impression that there's more in there than what I'm going to make it appear as there is. So in order to create a sense of texture in the bushes themselves, I worked in wet on dry, so the paintbrush was wet and the paper was dry, and I worked in a purplish mix of a purple and bluish mix of green. So I took my sap green and I mixed just a very small amount of indigo and purple, and that kind of made this nice shadow look, and I stippled that in, and then after that I added some green to highlights. So the important thing is, do not overdo the stippling. I have a very bad habit of not seeing when I should be done and continuing on anyways. So it kind of overdoes it. But it's very important to remember that there's going to be highlights and shadows, and trying to add those in as well as you can. I used the wet on dry technique also on the bark of the trees, and I also used it on the road itself. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Comment below and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!